Hi there, this is Anne-Louise from Lark Tweed Creative, and in this video I'm going to show you how spacing works within Kajabi. This applies to websites and landing pages. This is not a function that is necessarily in the product or course section of Kajabi. So I am in a website though to show you how this function works. So for example, we can see here, let's say this quote here is overlapping into this section, and how can we make that happen seamlessly and in a beautiful way and that things don't look all scrunched up. So I'm going to click on this background here, the hero, and so there are multiple levels where you're going to find spacing. You're going to find it on I call this level 2 because you've got level 1. I talk about this when I talk about sections, but in regards to spacing, you will find spacing at level 2. So level 1 is this hierarchy here, where it's like all of the sections of the home page, for example. But once you go into a section, and this would be level 2, and then once you go into an element of that section, i.e. this, actually we'll go to this one, and this would be level 3, you've got spacing here as well. So we're going to first start at level 2. So if you go to desktop layout or mobile layout, so we'll start with desktop, and then you'll have to adjust it separately for mobile. But if you go into desktop, you'll notice that you have these four these four kind of like numbers here, and what do they mean? So this is desktop section padding. So we're in the background here, so it's this background image, the overall size of this section. And so when the numbers are kind of faded, those are just like the default numbers for this section. It's not like that on every section, but here it is like that. And you can adjust this to 100. You can still put a number in there, but it'll start moving things around. If you just delete it completely, it'll go to those default numbers. But if you wanted this page to be a little bit longer because you want the next section to kind of overlap into this section without touching the button or touching the other pieces of that section, then you would, this is where you would do that. So here it's at 100, which is pretty good, and it's at a default of 100, and it's allowed for enough spacing for this piece to overlap into this section, and it's not causing any issues. The spacing looks good. You can always close this tab to really see how, because that'll really show you like on desktop how is that going to look with the spacing, and it looks really good. Like it's more than enough spacing. You can see here that this is overlapping right now, and usually all you need to do to fix that is save, but for some reason, because I deleted it and put something back the way it was, it's not really doing that. But like, let's say here I go save. So that's a bit of a, in my opinion, a Kajabi glitch that, as you can see now, it's fixed. But yeah, so this looks good here, right? So this is a good reference. Mostly used to make within that section just a little bit bigger. But when it comes to the elements and the spacing of elements within a section, it is a little bit different, and it's important to understand all the different parts of that. So we're going to jump into an actual piece of a section. Also know that at the level of like the backgrounds at level 2, you can also vertically top align or bottom align the image that's in the background too. And so that's what this is for. It's speaking to that background image. So wherever that image is like, where do you want it to be aligned? And should it be center aligned or right, have a space between, left? So you want to explore these, and the best recommendation I can tell you is try it for yourself. Remember what it's at, because if you like where it's at, you don't remember where it was at initially, that can be a little frustrating. So what you want to do is just remember, okay, this is centered, and then try all the different options that it's giving you and see what it does and what it looks like when it does that. And you'll understand, it'll help you have a better understanding of what each of these elements are. But if we dive in deeper into parts within a section, so that I would call level 3. So let's go into the text. So I would say this level 3. This is the deepest you can go into the hierarchy. So you've got the columns, so that's spacing as well. So you've got basically, this is a column of 12 And that's, standard within the website world of the way what websites are structured. It's always a 12 column. And so if you're going to put two things side by side, or in this case even three, you want to make sure that your columns can sustain that section. So if you've got one that's 7 and the other that's 6, for example, as soon as it's more than 12, things are going to start stacking. So, and if you want things to not be so big, like in this case, this is 5, but I could have done 6 here, 6 here, and this image is actually lifted. So this is all about spacing as well. So make sure that your columns are right, and then we want to go to desktop layout. And so the text is aligned to the right. Now there's inside spacing and then there's outside spacing. And what does that mean? This is super important to understand, and it can be a little confusing. But basically, when I hover over this, you can see this blue dotted box. And you can see that next to the text here, there is space. There's space between the walls. And there's a little bit of space on that side too, but it's a lot smaller. And that is the default space when you don't have this box checked off. Let's say I check it off right now. So that changes it a little bit, and see how now the spacing is a lot tighter, and here there's no space left. So that's what this does. It makes it flush to the box. This one is flush to the box. You can see there's no space. So I'm going to unclick that because I want that space in this case, and if you don't want it, you can remove it too. I added a bit of space within the box and not outside of it, because once you start playing outside the box, you're also affecting the columns, okay? You're increasing basically the width of the space that this element is taking, because you're pushing everything around it. So then there's not enough room for all those 12 columns. So that's why if you want to keep the integrity of this 5 column element, but you want to add space to the left, you'll do it within the box. And so here it's at 55, so it gives it enough spacing that everything kind of looks tighter, because without that the text would go so long, and you don't, unless you have more text, you might want to adjust this, but otherwise you can just leave it as is, and that's how it gives it that type of feel. Now if we wanted, let's actually go to this image here and see how this is 3 columns, because that's how big I wanted this image to be, but it's actually not using the 12 columns, and you'll see it in the spacing. It's at minus 696, so that means this element is actually on a different line, but with the spacing, I pushed it up. So that's how it shows up there. And using the outside spacing, it's like I'm removing space by using the minus, and same to the, because it's probably stacked below the text, and so that's how I was able to have it overlap over top of the text in the images like that. So that's, but it gives you kind of a good idea to see, like, okay, what's the difference between these two types of spacing? This is a little more complex, and if you might not want to play with that as much, because it can get really confusing if you're not used to it. So if we look at this image here, oh, it's not flush. Oh, okay, so yeah, so you see here it's not flush. If I click on this, it'll make the image a little bit bigger, and now it is flush. You can see it here. But let's say I wanted to increase the spacing within this box to the right of it, to the right. So I'm going to go inside spacing, and let's say we just put in 40. Okay, it'll shrink that box, because that box will still be, how many columns are we? We're at 5 columns. It's still 5 columns, but now we've added space within it. So it helps you kind of control the size of the elements. But let's see what happens if we add 100 outside of the spacing, outside of the box. Now it's really pushing it towards the text. But because there's 12, it's a 12 column, this is 5 and this is 5, that means we still have 200, we could put it to 200 and it should still fit. Okay, well, we are also, the screen's open, but if I have the full screen here, you can see, but it's starting to create a lot of space there. But as soon as you would go to 300, so let's say each 100 is a column. So if I do that, now even with the full screen, it'll start stacking. So, but if I was to do, let's say I did 300 within the box, look how small the image gets. So I hope that gives you context as to how the spacing works. and how it allows you to kind of move things around. But yeah, so I mean, this is basic. These are basically like the basics of spacing for web design, and understanding how to like lay things out and making sure, you know, if you want things to look a certain way and if you want to get really specific, this is how you would go about it within Kajabi. I know that with other platforms, you can actually start playing and resizing the elements like directly within the page. But in this case, since we don't have that option, like even if I click on here, I can't move it around. This is how you would go about it, is by adding space around or within the boxes. And let me know if you have any comments or questions below.